What's up guys? It's time for another reaction video today. I'm going to be doing another reaction video similar to my last one. The last one I did was on Finland's prison systems, and today we're going to be doing Swedish prison versus the United States prison. How do they actually compare? Sweden and Finland are actually pretty close to one another. Just to pull that up for geographical references, because I actually didn't know that. I'm sure a lot of people do, but for those who don't, there they are. They probably have pretty similar practices. Expecting Swedish to be pretty similar to Finland's. This is going to be a pretty good video though, because I think it's going to delve into a little bit of the United States prison system. But I was just so shocked and incredibly just kind of awed by how laid back and how easy they were on their prisoners, even murderers, just letting them free range and just do whatever they really wanted. I mean, yeah, they had to come back to a dormitory and stuff, but like they were still like able to go out public, own a car. It's just such a stark contrast to what we have in the U.S., which I know the U.S. needs to change a little bit. Well, they need to change a lot on the prison system, but for sure, I still don't agree with murderers being able to walk around freely. But yeah, we're gonna watch this video and hopefully learn a little bit more about how each system runs. And before I get into this video, I do want to say a lot of what I don't actually know anyone from prison personally in my life, but I have read some books about prisoners, and I do watch a YouTube channel from Lawton. I highly recommend that you go check him out if you're interested in this kind of stuff. I'm gonna post a link to one of his videos in the description, but definitely check him out. He's got a pretty big channel now, and he's trying to use his channel and money that he makes from it to kind of redo the prison system. So he's a great guy, great to listen to, really good storyteller. So definitely check him out. And in case you hadn't noticed, there are two things that changed. I did get a haircut, and I actually got some curtains for my blinds. So I don't know if you've noticed, but those are the two things that changed. But anyway, let's get into this video and learn something.
The United States has about 5% of the world's population, yet has a quarter of all the world's prisoners, with roughly 1 in every 100.
Yeah, just real fast. I think that's something that people always forget, is even though the United States is so vast, we actually relatively have a pretty small population. It's only like 360 million compared to China and India with over 1 billion. So yeah, we're really not that. We really don't have a lot of people. And 25% of the world prisoners. That is insane. But yeah, anyway.
7 American adults behind bars. With the crackdown on the war on drugs leading to harsh prison sentences, as well as no-tolerance policing, the American public has to ask itself if punishment is really working as intended. Well, while the two nations share vastly different demographics and thus different challenges, it isn't hard to take a look at some of Sweden's prison policies
they show the two maps right there.
Practices to see that perhaps there's a better way for the U.S. to handle its prison populations. America's prison population has been growing exponentially since after the Second World War. Yet it wasn't until the crack epidemic of the 1980s and the ensuing war on drugs that the U.S. prison population really boomed. Federal and state legislation was quickly passed which dictated mandatory minimum sentences for any drug-related crime, all in a bid to make crime so unattractive that the harsh punishments would deter would-be criminals. Sadly, this seemed to have little effect, and all that U.S. legislature really did was create a situation where first-time offenders were swept up into the main prison population and left there for years. This hardened the inmates' resolve and wisened them up criminally. Prison very quickly became known as Crime University because inexperienced first-time offenders would be sentenced to years and leave better able to commit the crimes they were originally sentenced for, mentored for years by the more experienced inmates. To make matters worse, American prisons have historically offered few opportunities for rehabilitation or ways for inmates to.
Yeah, so that's something I actually am pretty against. I definitely think there should be more rehabilitation in the U.S. prison systems. And I'm also kind of against the war on drugs. I feel like it's starting to become kind of a thing in the past now. But I feel like it's done more harm than good. And this is just my own personal opinion, but I feel like it would almost be better to make all drugs legal. As bad as that sounds, I think there's some pretty good studies that would show that when you take away the legality of it, or the forbidden fruit, so to say, you kind of do away with, like, so pretty much you can go try any drug, but then if you don't like it, it's not a big deal. You don't really get quite as hooked onto it. Now again, I don't having drug experience. I don't really know anyone that does. So I'm not really speaking from personal experience, just from what I've heard other people who have experience say. But definitely, I definitely think the war of drugs is coming to an end, but I definitely think it absolutely should come to an end and not be throwing everyone in prison for drugs. But not that we want, everyone to be doing drugs, but I think by taking away the war on drugs, you would actually have less drugs. But I don't know if I'm sure there's statistical proof that it would work or not. But anyway.
Better themselves and lay the foundation for a different type of life once back on the outside. By comparison though, in Sweden, public attitudes toward criminals are as hard as those in America. Swedish lawmakers have taken a far more humane approach to the treatment of prisoners. In Sweden, the collective view is that while crime must be punished, the individuals who commit these crimes will one day be rejoining society, and thus prison represents less a tool for punishment and more a chance to reform an individual while removed from the general population. Treating prisoners humanely is one of the first steps toward rehabilitation for the Swedish. In the US, many prisons run over capacity, and overall, the US is 103.9% over capacity. This leads to at times as many as 4 prisoners sharing a cell. And with many prison systems across the American states,
and again, when they're saying 4 prisoners per cell, they're probably talking like a 6x8 or 8x8 with 4 guys in 1 toilet. So absolutely overcrowded. Totally against that. But anyway, continue.
Running over budget, the problem only gets worse as parts of prisons or even entire prisons are closed in a bid to save money. This leads to further overcrowding, which can directly affect the health and comfort of prisoners, which in turn leads to prisoner-on-prisoner violence and even riots. In the US, prisoner-on-prisoner violence is fairly common, yet in Sweden it's extremely rare. Even more rare are prison riots in Sweden. Perhaps that's because by comparison the Swedes focus on housing prisoners in what they consider humane conditions, which means affording each prisoner a level of comfort and safety by not exceeding crowd capacity. The fact that the Swedish prison population has dropped from 5,722 prisoners to 4,500 over the last 10 years has helped not just with crowding issues, but with budget issues as wings of prisons or even entire prisons are closed down for a lack of need. There's also a general difference in the attitude of what prison is between the US and Sweden. With the US and its harsh sentencing guidelines, especially mandatory minimums for drug offenses, leading to a prison as a first resort mentality. In Sweden, prison is seen as a last resort, and the Swedish Penal Code actually tries to avoid prison terms when it can. Per Swedish guidelines, offenders must present an active threat to the general public if they're to qualify for prison time, as opposed to programs such as mandatory counseling, community service, or perhaps house arrest. Per the Swedish mentality, some people must be incarcerated, but even if they are, then it should be the goal of the state to release them back out into society in a better shape than they were when they first entered. Compare that to the US, which is firmly entrenched in a punishment mentality, with prisons slashing work release, education, and job skills programs. Some prisons have even forbidden inmates from being sent books by those on the outside, and restrict what reading materials inmates may order for themselves. A key focus of the Swedish prison system is seeing prisoners as individuals with psychological needs that need to be carefully attended to. Crime is not just an act in Sweden, but a consequence of an underlying social or psychological problem, and the prison system sees it as its responsibility to address these problems if it can. When you're considering the fact that these individuals will one day be released back into society as a whole, as the Swedish consider, then it makes perfect sense that prison shouldn't be about punishment but about rehabilitation and treatment. To this end, Swedish prison guards fulfill both security roles and rehabilitative roles, and each prisoner has a contact officer who monitors the inmate's progress toward their eventual return to society. This helps prisoners see guards not just as, well, guards, but also as individuals who are trying to help prisoners live better lives once back on the outside. Compare that to the US, where 10 times more people with mental health issues are housed in prisons than in mental health hospitals. These people receive no treatment for their psychological problems and instead must cope with them on their own with only occasional and very brief visits to a counselor if the budget affords it. Untreated mental health issues not only lead to violence in prison, but can grow exponentially worse in the highly stressful environment of prison and cripple an individual for life, severely limiting their ability to function outside of prison. In the US, crime is exactly that, just an activity, and no concern is paid for the economic or psychological motivations for that crime. Rather than try to address the root of a criminal problem, the US has for decades simply taken a weed whacker to the problem and left the roots in fertile soil, ready to regrow again. The focus in the US is on punishing people for their wrongs, either out of a sense of vengeance or under the false illusion that harsh punishments will work to deter crime, despite the fact that study after study has proven that this is a false conclusion. There is little to no concern placed on the fact that prisoners will one day return to society, and attempts to rehabilitate prisoners while there's a chance to are all but non-existent. Some prisons do offer job skills training and educational courses, but for the majority of American prisons, inmates are seen as tenants and little more. Prison guards fulfill one and only one duty in the US, and that's to keep inmates in line and punish offenders. Rather than build a protectorate relationship with inmates, prison guards in the US are billed solely as tools of punishment by a penal system that cares little for the individual. This is likely why incidents of violence against prison guards is so high in the US and so low in Sweden. One of the most controversial practices of the Swedish prison system, however, is the use of low-security open prisons, which are in many ways exactly what they sound like. Here, prisoners live in housing that resembles a dorm and have free access to TVs and other forms of entertainment. Individuals are also allowed to commute to a job and even visit families, all the while being electronically monitored.
So at least they show that they have a house arrest bracelet. And that the previous video I did with Finland, it didn't show that he had any form of tracking. Maybe he did, but they didn't bring that up. So at least if you're out in public, at least you have some form of tracker to know where the prisoners are. So that's a little bit better.
Prison staff and prisoners all eat together in community spaces, and
that was really cool though too. Creating a relationship with the guards is probably really important to, so they don't attack them. So they see them as a person, instead of just like, oh, you're a prisoner, or oh, you're the guard, you're gonna beat me. Creating a personal relationship, that is a really good idea.
the inmates do not wear uniforms. Per the Swedish, this open prison system is more effective than closed prisons in reducing recidivism, or the rate at which freed prisoners repeat offenses and are re-jailed. Inmates have strict curfews to follow and have many rules imposed on them and their behavior. Their trips outside of the prison are closely monitored, and inmates know that they're always just one infraction away from being sent to a regular, closed prison. Yet the Swedes contend that by treating prisoners ethically and fairly, even granting them a degree of autonomy, they're far less likely to recommit an offense once released. The focus is once more on humane treatment and correcting bad behavior, as well as building a prisoner's chances for a successful life outside of prison. That might sound naive to American prison officials, and yet the numbers don't lie. Sweden not only has a shrinking prison population while the US is growing, but its recidivism rate is at 29% after 3 years. The US, meanwhile, has a recidivism rate of 67.8% after 3 years. Clearly, a focus on treating prisoners humanely and treating psychological and other issues while building life skills is working to make Sweden a safer place, and are things that the United States could learn from.
Okay, I think that's it on the video. So yeah, that was actually a lot better video than the other one. I agree on a lot of that stuff. I'm not trying to make a prison channel. I'm just trying to do reactions. So I'm not going to be doing too many. There's tons of videos. They show really harsh prisons. Sweden and Finland are definitely more lax prisons, easier. As an American, it is hard for me to wrap my head around open prisons pretty much. How they showed though in this one, Sweden, I definitely think that would actually be totally doable. Now, I will say there are some big drawbacks in the U.S. right now. A lot of it is that for the most part, we have private prisons, and it is like a business. So pretty much, the prisons make money off the prisoners, and they make a lot of money off the prisoners. So they actually have an incentive right now to keep prisoners. And the thing with budget spending and stuff, I'm sure there's tons of money if they really cared about the prisoners to provide them for like education and stuff. Again, I'm not an expert, I don't know, but I actually totally agree with how Swedish does it. Like, that's a little bit different than Finland, at least in this video. I still think if you're a murderer, you shouldn't be out walking around. I'm just sorry, I can't get I can't wrap my head around that. But for like lower offense crimes, totally. If you have a house arrest bracelet and you have like curfews and they're teaching you like discipline and order and giving you job opportunities. Another thing with the U.S. is when you go to prison and you come out, you pretty much can't get a job anywhere. You either have to go back into crime, or you might get a job like fast food or something that doesn't really actually pay enough to provide. So totally, I think we should definitely change our prison system. I'm not saying do away with them. You still need law and order, but definitely, I mean, if Finland and Sweden are doing so well and they have good numbers to do that, I think we should do away with our greed. When I say we, I mean the prison systems, and focus more on rehabilitation and getting people back out into society, as opposed to just keeping them in this. It's kind of this evil prison system, honestly. So I don't know. I'm not trying to make a channel about this or do anything. It's just reaction. These are just my honest opinions, but that's how I feel. I definitely think we can look towards Sweden, Finland. I'm sure there's some other European countries that have like higher and nicer prisons for their inmates. So definitely learned a lot. I really liked some of the Swedish things. I really liked integrating with the guards and becoming more personal about it. Great idea. So totally think we should look towards that and learn something. If you guys like this video, please like and subscribe. Comment if there's anything you want me to react to, or just comment whatever you have a question on or think I can improve on. So anyway, that's it, guys, and peace out.